Hello, 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 and welcome to Kindred Skulls. Who's that voice you hear? Like an absentee father returning from a sabbatical. Gregg Blake, that's me. I'm back on the podcast this week. Nick isn't able to join us, but I am thrilled to be here to discuss this wild and wacky Minnesota Vikings team. I'm sure Matt's gonna try to pin me down on my feelings about the team this year. Matt Freese, one of the other co-hosts and man with the much better beard than me. How are you this evening?
I'm doing fantastic, Greg. I think the real question all of our listeners want to know is how are you doing, given the fact that, it's been probably about 12 weeks or so since they've heard from you. But no, it's not to dig that in too deep. It's just been a busy year, and it's been a lot of fun watching this football team. I mean, I don't even know how to feel about this football team, so I don't think I can force you to answer that question, because it's like, yeah, they win in stupid ways all of the time, but they keep winning, so that's pretty sweet.
Yep. It's one of those situations where, no matter what the analytics are saying, and no matter what my eyeballs are saying while I'm watching it, at the end of the day, the record is all that anyone will really remember. Like yep. If you think about that classic Giants team that everyone always brings up about these kinds in this situation, the one that started 0-5 and then it ended up going on to the Super Bowl, that you remember the high points of that team, the helmet catch and that kind of stuff. You don't really remember how they got there so much. And so that's the reality, that the Vikings are winning, and any grousing or complaining that I could do is ultimately fruitless. So let's just talk about this latest win. Let's just dive right in. So another up and down game. Felt very, very familiar in terms of the script. I feel like I've read this script. You know what it feels like, Matt? It feels like if you're working on some kind of essay or a script or something, and you give it to some people that you really respect, and then they give you notes back. And then you hand them the exact same thing like a week later, and be like, "Look what changes I made." And it's like, did you make changes? Like, yeah, I changed that word there, and I adjusted this thing here. It's like, okay, but I gave you all these other notes. Anyway, that's kind of how it feels watching this right now.
So what you're saying is the Vikings writers for this season that the NFL employed got lazy, and they're just like, let's run with the same thing every single week. Justin Jefferson, great. Do they get an early lead? Sure. Do they give that up? Absolutely. Do they have to scramble at the end to try to win?
What if this week we make them fall way behind, but then they get the lead back? Yeah, let's do that. It's like these guys, we need to get some like cocaine in that room or something. Get them real fired up for a week, for God's sake. Let's come up with some creativity. So anyway, another weird game. Matt, why don't you walk us through it a little bit? Obviously, JJ2K is still on the table.
Yeah.
He had a big week. TJ Hawkinson contributed a lot as well. What did you notice this week from the big dogs there in the passing attack?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the passing attack was really the story of the offense, and the offense went through its lull in the middle of the game that we seem to have gone through for a while. I think a lot of that was due to the pass protection, honestly. Kirk Cousins took 4 sacks. The Giants, particularly on the interior of the defensive line, kind of dominated the Vikings offensive line. You had Dexter Lawrence, kind of dominating the interior of the Vikings offensive line. But when Kirk Cousins did have time, the passing game was able to get going in a big way with both TJ Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson, right? Obviously, both of them had over 10 catches for over 100 yards. Hawkinson had the 2 touchdowns. Jefferson had the 1 touchdown. And it's just some really, I think, phenomenal stuff, and kind of shows how TJ Hawkinson has expanded the Vikings offense since he got into that role, right? He's a downfield vertical threat at tight end, and he's also a ball winner, as we saw on that touchdown, right? I think we saw both of those in the same play.
And you got kind of a hint of that earlier in the season with it was noticeable how often Irv Smith would be open or part of the game plan, and he just could not get it done. And so bringing Hawkinson in, and you and Nick, and I think a lot of other people thought that that would be a really interesting fit. And I think it succeeded. I don't know. It succeeded my expectations. Like we knew he had talent, and we knew that the tight end position could be very important. But it's really yielding some huge, huge benefits right now.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the stats that's been going around there is that Kirk Cousins' ADOT has increased significantly since TJ Hawkinson was added to the roster. I don't think that's an accident. I think his ability as a vertical field stretcher, and also, frankly, just his size. I kind of mentioned this prior to the season, but Irv Smith's not a big guy, right? Johnny Mount wasn't a big guy. We didn't have a big ball winner, contested catch kind of guy at the receiving positions at all, right? Which is something that, Kyle Rudolph was able to provide us previously, but we haven't had since he left the team. And TJ Hawkinson provides that ability. Now, I will say he hasn't been perfect, right? He's had a couple drops. He had a drop in this game. He had a couple drops against the Lions that really ended up, hurting us pretty badly in that game. And, it's been inconsistent here or there, but the highs have been so worth the trade, which we if you go back to when we made the trade, I think Nick and I both unequivocally liked it because the compensation wasn't really all that big. It was like a couple picks, essentially, like a couple late day 2 picks is what the trade compensation ended up equaling out to. So I really think it was a win for the Vikings, and I really think it's unlocked a level of the offense that has me more comfortable in the offense and more comfortable in this offense going against other playoff teams than I would have been previously. So that's TJ Hawkinson, right? We can talk about the 2 touchdowns. One was a cool design by Kevin O'Connell, right? You had it was essentially a rollout play, which we've seen a billion times over the past years with the Kubiaks, where you have a 3-level flood, and Hawkinson's route was the deep over that becomes the kind of middle route in that 3-level flood, right? But instead of him continuing the deep over, he turns it around and runs to the corner. The way the Giants defense was playing that, they had a safety over to the right-hand side where the Vikings faked the rollout to, and that safety never had a chance to come over and get Hawkinson. The linebacker level did not sink deep enough. They did not recognize it in time to get Hawkinson. He was wide open in the back of the end zone. Nice toe tap to get it in. Like, Kirk had good ball placement there. You want to put it high back 5 is what they say. You want to put it high there where the receiver has to go up a little bit. But really good chemistry and work there to get that first touchdown. The second touchdown was just a fantastic contested catch. He was the number 3 receiver, and he runs a wheel route with Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne kind of being pick players a little bit. That offensives will call it a rub. Defenses might call it a pick. And he doesn't get all that open. He doesn't create a ton of separation, but his vertical ball-winning ability is what makes that catch happen. Obviously, he catches it on the defender's helmet and is just barely able to corral it and secure it through the ground. We got a couple of pretty good replays of that, and I think he did clearly secure it through the ground, and that was the second touchdown. But if I flip it over to the Justin Jefferson side of things, I think I just want to keep hammering home how good and how rare Justin Jefferson is as a player, because it's just absolutely incredible week in and week out. The things he does on a regular basis are just absurd. There was a deep out early in the game where it was pretty casual. The corner was playing off coverage. He created like 15 yards of separation. His vertical threat, and it wasn't a good play by the corner by any means, right? But like his vertical threat created 15 yards of separation. Like that's on a 12-yard deep out. Like that's absolutely crazy. You had him being able to make catches and do things like on a dig route over the middle. Kirk actually did a really good job on this play, but the way he catches it, sidesteps a linebacker, gets upfield for a couple extra yards. There was the third down conversion. It was 3rd and 5. We're running a dragging concept, which is a slant flat, and just kind of the details on that concept. And I think this is the way it's coached, but he has a bit of a vertical release for a couple yards, right? Then goes outside, makes a catch, and is able, with the body control, to stay in bounds when the defender is trying to push him out of bounds, get an extra step, stay in bounds, and get the first down on 3rd and 5, leads to a touchdown. And then the route on his touchdown, on that 17-yard touchdown at the end of the game, was just awesome. He's running a dig route, and he's able to flatten it so much. When I say flatten a dig route, it means that when he makes a break, when you make a break, you're trying to make that at a 90-degree angle on a dig route, where if you start your break at the 5-yard line, which is I think where he started it, you don't want to drift backwards. Now, naturally, because you were running full speed forward, you're going to drift backwards a little bit, but he kept it within a yard of where that initial break was. And that's extremely important to do on those routes, because what it did is it allowed him to be underneath the safety that was on that play and not give the safety time to hit him in the back and try to knock the ball out. He was underneath the safety and he was able to extend into the end zone for the touchdown after he caught that pass. It was, again, good ball placement from Kirk. Like, I should credit Kirk for how he played in this game as well. I thought he played pretty well, despite consistently being under pressure and taking a ton of hits. He stood in there and took some pretty big hits.
To that end, tell us a little bit about, so you mentioned this earlier, you kind of teased that the offensive line was having struggles yesterday, or on Sunday and Saturday. I got all my days mixed up. So what was there anything standing out to you in particular? Anything that was happening? What were the Giants doing? What did you notice, I guess?
Yeah, so one thing I think is relevant is that the Giants are a very heavy blitz team, right? They have Wink Martindale as their defensive coordinator, formerly of the Ravens. With the Ravens, they blitzed an incredible amount. And if you go back to it, I think they also just have a couple really good players there. Obviously, Leonard Williams is known as a great player. He's got that huge contract. But also Dexter Lawrence, particularly this year, has really come on and was just a game wrecker in this football game. There were a number of reps where he dominated Austin Schlottman, which I think has been an issue for the Vikings over the past couple of weeks, missing Garrett Bradbury. Not that Garrett Bradbury is the best player in the universe, right? But I think the level to which Schlottman has performed is not really what you want from a starting player, right? So I'm kind of excited to get Bradbury in there a little bit, but it wasn't just Schlottman getting beat, right? Lawrence beat Ezra Cleveland very cleanly on one play, on a couple of plays, really. Ed Ingram has been shaky here and there. There was a big loss he had right away that ruined a play. I think it was a run play, something else that leads to a sack. There was one play where Christian Darrisaw got ghosted. I thought Christian Darrisaw, again, had a really good game, but there was one play where I think it was Kayvon Thibodeau, or it was Azeez Ojulari, I don't remember, got him with a ghost move, just went right under him and was able to get to Kirk for a sack. So, it's missteps here and there, I would say, from Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw. That's not a significant problem, right? You're gonna get beat every once in a while, and they're playing like high level players. Like Christian Darrisaw is truly an elite level left tackle, or has played truly like an elite level left tackle this year. So that doesn't concern me so much. But the interior of the offensive line showing a little bit of weakness, especially with Garrett Bradbury not in there, is a concern for me going forward. And against the Packers, you have Kenny Clark as well, right? You also have Rashawn Gary, but Kenny Clark is the big concern for me with the Green Bay Packers, kind of looking forward a little bit here. So that's something just to keep an eye on. I don't think Bradbury will probably play. I don't know. This is pure speculation for me. I don't even know what the practice injury report says, but I doubt Bradbury will play, right? Just to try to keep guys as healthy as we can until the playoffs, since we've already got the 2nd or 3rd seed locked up. Like, it's not super, super critical. But I am excited to see him back in the game action there.
Awesome. Feels good to talk about some positive offensive line play after 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah, and one thing real quick before we move on to the defense, I think here, I thought Dalvin had a pretty good game too. Like, I think he's reading the game pretty well right now. I think he's playing off of blocks pretty effectively. I know it's kind of hit or miss with whether or not he's successful, but I mean, we kind of talk about this, and this is why, quote unquote, running backs don't matter, right? But like, a lot of the success of the running backs that the running backs have is based off of the offensive line play, right? And I think the offensive line play in the run game has been pretty hit or miss recently. But I think he's reading it out well, and he's making correct choices. It just isn't always fruitful because of the way that the defense is playing it. But when you have the passing weapons that the Vikings have, I don't think that matters all that much. So I'm pretty happy in general with the state of the offense.
It papers over a lot of problems.
Yep.
To have Justin Jefferson out there.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the defensive side of the ball. As we mentioned earlier, it was one of those games that we have, and we gave up a pretty decent number of points. It really came down to the wire because of that. What were you noticing on the defensive side of the ball that kind of stood out to you in this week?
So I guess there's a couple different things, right? I do think the Vikings have changed up their defensive approach recently. And it was put out there by Tom Pelissero right prior to the Colts game. Like, he gave the report that the Vikings are going to play more man coverage. I thought it was a little curious that they're feeding that information to a national NFL reporter, but like, it's true. They have done it. Like, and it might be, some rumblings where our defense isn't very good. They want to get it out there that, hey, we are trying to make changes to people. So sure, whatever. They're playing a lot more man coverage. It's a mixed bag, right? So like, Chandon Sullivan and Duke Shelley aren't that great. Like, I very much appreciate Duke Shelley for him being a practice squad corner that a corner that we signed off of the Bears practice squad, who has played quality starting snaps for the Vikings this year, right? Like, I mean, he's started and played most of 3 or 4 games now, and he hasn't been an abject disaster, right? He hasn't been a disaster. On the flip side of that, he's not all that good. Like, he is susceptible to getting beat. And I think size plays a part of that. There were a couple times where Isaiah Hodgins bodied him up in this game, right? Where Isaiah Hodgins made tough physical catches that Duke Shelley couldn't get because he lacks length and he kind of lacks that size. So that's
kind of a coming out party for Hodgins this week.
Yeah, no, I thought Hodgins actually played really well in this game. And then for and a lot of times with the way the Vikings are playing coverage structures, we've moved Patrick Peterson to the boundary, which is the short side of the field, which means you're most of the time going to have your 2 corners on the other side of the field, on the field side, and that would be Chandon Sullivan and Duke Shelley. And the Giants really attacked the Sullivan/Shelley side this game, right? Sully and Shelley, I guess is what you can call it. Chandon Sullivan, I thought was pretty
like a 90s sitcom about some hapless barflies. Sorry,
continue. So Sullivan, I thought, was pretty susceptible to in-breaking routes that required speed. That's like your drag routes or your deep crossers that kind of require the cornerback to have speed to catch up with. I thought he was pretty susceptible to that in man coverage. There was also a play where the Giants did a pretty good job of getting a pick or a rub, and they ended up getting a player wide open, and that was a big Richie James catch that went to for 30 or so yards, and it could have gone for more had he not been kind of straddling the sidelines and accidentally stepped out of bounds on his own volition there. And that one I don't fully put on Sullivan necessarily, right? Because it was a switch release, which means you have the 2 outside receivers and they cross each other at the snap. Sullivan ran right into the Giants' number 1 receiver, but there should be a mechanism for the Vikings to be able to swap the corners on that play, right? You should have an answer for that so you don't get picked off and allow a huge explosive play because your corner just got picked off, right? And he had no chance to make the play. So I do think that needs to be shored up in man coverage a little bit, but I also kind of think that once again we went back to the Vikings have already clinched a playoff spot, right? We've already clinched the 2 or 3 seed, right? So we're basically guaranteed to play the San Francisco 49ers in the second round of the playoffs, right? Whether it's home or away, it doesn't matter, assuming we win our first game. And our opponent isn't going to be all that great because the Cowboys are guaranteed to be the 5 seed at this point, right? So, I think it's time right now in the season for the team to do a little bit of experimenting, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then use that moving forward into the playoffs. So I'm okay with doing this man coverage stuff and kind of having a little bit of a learning curve to figure out what works. But I do think Sullivan and Duke Shelley are going to be a little bit of a liability there.
Well, to that end, regarding experimentation and so you go to more man looks that can sometimes free up defenders for blitzing, and then
yes.
you mentioned that's something that you picked up on this week that we're doing a little bit more of than we have earlier in the year. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's what you call a professional transition, folks. That's why we have Gregg on the podcast. I'm not able to do that sort of thing, roll one into the other. But no, seriously, we have also ratcheted up the blitzing in recent weeks, right? I don't remember if that was part of the Tom Pelissero report, but that is what happens when you start playing more man coverage, right? Man coverage, you have 5 defenders across the board, each on an individual man. when we talk man, when the NFL generally talks man coverage, they are talking about cover one, single high man coverage, right? So you have a deep safety, and then you have a robber or a rat, depending on whether or not it's a linebacker or a safety, who's kind of the whole player in the middle of the field. He helps with crossers. He does a bunch of stuff, but what you can do is you can take that player who's kind of a bonus player, right? The robber or the rat, and you can have, you know, that guy become a blitzer, or a position become a blitzer instead, and just play with the single man deep, right? And that's what the Vikings have really turned on, and I think it's been quite effective. Against Daniel Jones, I believe we sacked him 3 times, but we got pressure many more times, and we've done some pretty effective, pretty creative blitzing, sending linebackers from the second level. And we've gone into some of those double A gap mugs, like the front looks that Mike Zimmer was famous for. I don't think we're as good at it as we were under Mike Zimmer, right? I think he's kind of a mad genius when it comes to that sort of stuff. So it's not, shocking to me that we're not quite as good at it, but it's been pretty effective. I think, Zadarius Smith has slowed down over the last couple of weeks, at least in terms of production. And I think his injury has played a part in that. Like, I don't think he's quite the player that he was, but Daniel Hunter has really ratcheted it up. He's had 3.5 sacks over the past couple of weeks. He's overtaken the team lead in sacks. So it's kind of been a trade-off. And I think both have been playing pretty well all throughout the season. It's just kind of like, one game, one guy gets a sack, and another game, the other guy gets a sack, and it's kind of been split half and half this season in terms of who's getting sacks. Zadarius was more in the first half, Hunter's been more in the second half. So it's been really nice to see that production, and then also, just linebackers getting in the mix. And I will say they still need to work some things out on blitz coverages. There have been instances, and it happened against the Lions too, where we had a blitzing defender become unblocked, get after the quarterback, and the quarterback was able to get the ball out just by replacing where that blitzing defender was coming from. There was a pretty notable third down example against the Giants where just simply nobody was in the area. It was basically a free 10 to 15 yards because we sent the linebacker who was supposed to be in coverage there against the slant. So it is something, again, that we need to work through and iron out, but I really like the way we've brought blitzes the past couple of weeks and played more aggressive on defense, right? Because sitting back and allowing the opposing quarterback to throw for 300 yards clearly wasn't working. Now, we're still allowing the opposing quarterback to throw for 300 yards, but at least we're trying to do something about it, it feels like, is kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. Speaking of aggressive, Matt.
Yes.
Can we talk for a second about my guy, Brian Asamoah?
Yeah, man. He's been awesome.
I was so excited about him to start the year, and it's, we have not been given a whole ton to be excited about from the draft class this year. We have a couple of guys contributing, but I feel like Asamoah, he's got this way of making plays. He's not out there that often, and then when he's out there, he's doing something really exciting. And I think that's something that Harry used to do for us constantly. And I think every great defense, if you're gonna build one, you've got to have a player like that. A Darius Leonard who knocks the ball out all the time, or a Peanut Tillman they compared him to, or whatever. I think I was really pumped about that. I know it's just one play, it's a splash play, and I know he's small. I know you're not huge on him, but I don't know, man. I feel like there's something there.
No, I think he's been pretty electric. I think the way the Vikings play defense, actually, the size isn't like super duper critical. I mean, we talk about Eric Hendricks as an undersized linebacker as well, right? All the time. And actually the way, Dalvin Tomlinson and Harrison Phillips have been playing, we keep the linebackers pretty clean. There was a notable play in here where Saquon Barkley is a fantastic athlete, and he made the play to get outside of Asamoah, but I don't think every running back in the NFL would have been able to do it. Where Asamoah shot the gap, it was electric. It's like those plays he made in college at Oklahoma against Baylor, where he shot the gap, could have gotten the guy 2 yards in the backfield. It looked like he was shot out of a cannon to do it. Obviously, he forced a fumble in this game. Pretty impressive stuff. I think he was in man coverage or whatever. Or it might have been zone. He was a little bit late. He wasn't quite in the spot, but he caught up to it, punched the ball out, and then makes a really athletic play to get the ball before it goes across the sideline, scoop it up, and run down the field in one fluid motion, get like 10 or so yards in the return. Like, that play just showed his athleticism and his ability to to get the ball, to find the ball and make plays, which is something that we have been lacking a little bit on this defense. I mean, it's kind of been hit or miss, but in recent weeks, I'd say we've definitely been lacking it, right? Early in the season, Harrison Smith has 4 interceptions on the season. He was providing that spark kind of early. Patrick Peterson also had 3 or 4 early on, and he had another one in this game, but it's kind of been at a little bit of a lull towards, as we got towards the middle of the season and kind of had these down games on defense in recent weeks. So it's nice to see a guy come in there and provide that spark. And I don't think necessarily that this means benching Jordan Hicks or but having him rotated into the mix adds a little bit of a spark, because I think Jordan Hicks has had some pretty decent plays as well. I will say I think Asamoah's athleticism in coverage over him will be important for the Vikings if they have matchup players that they need to go against in the playoffs.
You don't build great defenses with guys like Jordan Hicks. You build them with guys like Brian Asamoah. But the thing is, it makes me excited for the future, because if that's the kind of mold of defender that they really want to bring in here long term, I like that direction. I like it a lot. So.
Yeah. Lewis Cine, who is somebody who has not been able to play because obviously he had the pretty bad broken leg early in the season, is a similar style of player to Brian Asamoah, right? Very fast, and more instinctive, I think, than Asamoah. I didn't think Asamoah was like hugely instinctive, but I think he's played pretty well. But just the explosive kind of big playmaker is, I think, what we might be able to get out of Lewis Cine later in the season, or next season, I should say, as well, if he's able to come back healthy.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about lack of big plays, but in order to win, in crucial games like this, you have to make big plays, and defensively, we had a big one this week from the man who found the fountain of youth. Patrick Peterson made another huge play. Let's talk a little bit about let's dive into this week's segment of Tape Talk, where Matt Freese dives in to the details, the nitty gritty of what happened on a given play. Tell us a little bit about the Pat Pete interception.
Yeah, so one thing I mentioned earlier when talking about Chandon Sullivan is that he really struggled to stay with guys running across the field on drag routes and deep crossers and that sort of thing. Patrick Peterson, I think, despite his age, has actually done, in the last couple of weeks, with us playing more man coverage where he's being asked to do that, a really good job of sticking with those routes across the field. It feels like he kind of has found a fountain of youth with the athleticism a little bit, and his interception was a play like that. So the 49ers are in a condensed split, and they've got pretty much everybody tight to the line of scrimmage, and then they use play action. It's kind of a 2-man route concept with a vertical to one side and an over to the other side. The Vikings respond to this by playing man defense, but the thing with the condensed split, right, and I think this is against Isaiah Hodgins from Patrick Peterson, the thing with him being in a condensed split is it changes what are called your divider rules on defense. So if a player is inside a certain landmark on the field, you will have your corner play outside leverage on him, which means he's to the receiver's outside because they're more dangerous outside. Like, theoretically, you have inside help, so you want to protect your outside more. If he's outside that certain landmark, you play with inside leverage because you want to try to pin him to the sideline as much as possible, right? So it becomes a difficult route concept, and the reason the Giants have this condensed split is because they know they're running a crossing route with Isaiah Hodgins, right? So they know the response to that by defenses is to play with outside leverage for the corner. When you're playing with outside leverage against a crosser route, it's very difficult for you to keep up because the receiver knows what his break is. You have to hedge against other possibilities, but B, you're just further away from where the receiver wants to go, right? So I think he does a really good job in this instance, just keeping up with Isaiah Hodgins over the field in man coverage. He doesn't have the inside help. The safety, the single high safety, is taken up by the vertical route on the other side of the field. The linebacker is sucked up by the play action, so it's one-on-one for him, right? And the throw is just a step behind Hodgins. Hodgins kind of has to reach back and cradle it kind of where it's in his hip pocket, and Patrick Peterson is able to undercut that, get underneath the receiver, and make the interception before Hodgins can try to make a play on the ball. If the throw's in a good location, I still think Patrick Peterson is able to get a hand on it and break up the pass. I just think he had really good coverage in this instance. The throw's not perfect. That's what, to me, leads to it being an interception, but I think overall the coverage was excellent, and I think that it's really shown that Patrick Peterson has been able to keep up in man coverage. Now, there was an instance where he got beat on a double move. That's him reading the play wrong, right? That's not necessarily a speed thing. So I think that despite my trepidation about the other corners who are starting for us, I think Patrick Peterson has us in a really good position, at least where he's concerned, at the level that he's playing at right now.
And that proved to be enough this week. As we downed the New York Giants, we go to 12-3. Inexplicably, somehow, we're 12-3. And now we have a matchup coming up against our hated division rivals with an opportunity to put their season in the ground.
Yeah, so real quick, before we move on to that, let's just give Greg Joseph a little bit of love here. Because, I mean, a 61-yard field goal to win the game, awesome, right? Awesome stuff.
Especially considering how many of us pretty much assumed he's going to miss every kick now at this point, and that's not been the case, actually. He's been pretty damn clutch.
Yeah, he's been pretty clutch. He's been clutch all season, really. He has missed kicks, right? We have the pair of missed 56-yard field goals, I think, in that one game. We have the stretch where he wasn't able to make a field goal over 50 yards, right, which was pretty disappointing. But to Kevin O'Connell's credit, to Kwesi's credit, to Matt Daniels' credit, they stuck by him and stuck with him and have trusted him, the entire time. And I think hopefully it's paid dividends, right? Hopefully this is a guy who continues to kick well moving forward. Obviously, we still need to get the extra points cleaned up. He didn't miss one in this game, but he's missed one at least recently in the past couple weeks. So that's something that, I'm still going to be a little bit nervous about, I think, every time he kicks an extra point. But overall, just sticking with him and giving him the opportunity to succeed like this, I think can be a real confidence booster from him. And hopefully it continues moving forward.
Absolutely. That's one of those things that, in sports, we really, really have almost eliminated from the conversation is that sports are played by human beings. And, they not every human being fits into a tiny little box. And that was one thing that I'm really appreciating about Coach Kevin and everything that the team's doing is, I feel like there's a little more humanity involved. And I think that can yield great things. And if Greg Joseph's hitting game-winning 60-yard field goals, that's a testament to the coaching staff, like you said. So, awesome. Well, so I teased it a little bit already. Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers, who are somehow still in the hunt.
Cockroaches, man. They're cockroaches. It's so annoying. I'm so annoyed.
Classic cockroach season from the biggest cockroach in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. So what the hell? Okay, so they're still in the playoff hunt, but we have an opportunity to play a relevant game of football here and crush these guys and knock them out of the playoffs, and we owe them a couple of those. What do you feel? What's your gut instinct? How are you feeling about this week against the Pack here?
I don't love it just because I don't feel confident about any. I mean, we hit this at the top, right? Like every Vikings game this season has either been the Vikings have gotten blown out or been some stupid protracted mess where like you're always nervous until the last couple seconds, right? Where like they get a big lead and then they cough it up, or they fall behind and then they come back.
I'm not even nervous anymore. I like to say I feel like I'm watching a science experiment. I'm just sort of watching it unfold, and I'm going, oh yes, and that's when there it is. Oh yes, and great. Now we win.
Actually, no, that's true too. I used to get like super stressed out when the Vikings were in close games, and this season I'm just like, it's gonna happen. Like I could either like get my blood pressure really up about it, or I can just, accept that it's going to happen. And actually, it doesn't matter whether or not they win or lose at this point, right? Because they've won so many close ones that they've clinched a really good playoff spot. So at the end of the day, I want to beat the Packers. I would really love to end their season. It would bring me no end of pain if the Packers ended up being the 7 seed, the Vikings the 2 seed, or the Packers theoretically, I think, still have a shot at the 6 seed and could play us as the 3 seed, and then they beat us in the playoffs. Like, that would just be so painful. There's no benefit to having that happen. So why can't we just end the season now?
It's not gonna happen. That will not happen. We're gonna play a crazy game against these guys. Aaron Rodgers has been very susceptible this year, at least compared to recent years. He's not got the kind of targets that he's had in the past. Everybody knows his struggles with the receiving group are well documented. His being a complete bitch about everything is well documented. We got Christian Watson. Is kind of dinged up. He might not play. He's been what appears to be a real relevant player and probably going to be very, very good. But he's got another injury, so he might not be. At the very least, he's not going to be 100%. I just don't. I don't know. I think we'll probably play an up and down game, just like we have all year, like you said, and then we're going to win. That's just the way it's going to be. And then they can go home and cry about it and call us frauds. And, everybody's happy. We're happy. At least.
Yeah,
everybody matters.
So I do want to get into this a little bit because it's been a while since we've played the Packers, right? So I kind of want to break down the matchup just a little bit and see maybe how it's changed. I think Christian Watson...
this annoying fucking team all year. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I think Christian Watson has added a dynamic element to their game, but without him in the lineup, or if he's injured to any significant extent, I don't think they're going to generate that many explosive plays, right? And a catastrophic defensive performance could create an explosive play for them, right? The Vikings are not outside having catastrophic defensive performances this year. Like, the defense is really not good. But that notwithstanding, we're going to kind of force the Packers to make those, 10, 15 play drives, march down the field and kind of do that. They might be capable of doing that, but the one thing with Aaron Rodgers, especially this season, is that he gets impatient pretty quickly in games, right? If we're able to take a lead and he's down a little bit, he might try to force a couple things deep, and we do like to generally play a pretty safe defense, so he has been susceptible to making those kinds of mistakes and interceptions, and it's particularly bad for him because he doesn't have the receivers to warrant, making those attempts, right? Allen Lazard, I don't think is, a quality number one receiver. He might be more like he's like a KJ Osborne level player, right? I think, and he's, being trotted out there as their number one receiver. So I definitely think that is an issue for them on the offensive side of the ball. Aaron Jones really hasn't shown much in the past couple weeks. I think he's been dinged up a little bit. AJ Dillon has played pretty well. I am concerned with their run game a little bit, but again, that plays into the Aaron Rodgers impatience. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be willing to allow AJ Dillon to run 30 times in this game? I don't think so. I think he's going to want to throw the ball a little bit, so that might work out in the Vikings' favor. Now, again, we can't allow them to dink and dunk down the field, which is something we are susceptible to. It is something that, we pointed out, even as good as the win in week 1 was, when the Packers were successful, it was when they were dinking and dunking down the field. They were attacking the flats. They were trying to have those 15 play drives. So if we're not able to stop that again, that's a concern for me on defense. On the offensive side of the ball, I think we're clicking enough that we're going to be able to go against the Packers. I don't think Jair Alexander, despite making the Pro Bowl over Patrick Peterson, which I don't agree with, has been playing all that well this year. I don't think their defense is nearly what it was hyped up to be at the beginning of the season, right? It's like, oh, look at how much talent the Packers defense has. Well, they're not very good because they're not very well coached by Joe Barry. I think Justin Jefferson could go off for another big game. I don't know what the weather conditions are like. I think they're pretty good, actually. I think Chicago's up to like 70 degrees or something now after being absolutely frigid last week. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what that situation is like there. Obviously, it's outdoors and that has a factor, but I don't think that really will slow Justin Jefferson down all that much. So I would hope for a big game between Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson. Maybe get some of those secondary options going if Jefferson is, the primary target of their attention on defense. And then, I'm not really too worried about the running game. Like, I just don't think the running game is all that impactful for the Vikings this year. I think it's all about JJ, right? So even if they're able to slow us down in the run game a little bit too much, that doesn't scare me all that much. The one thing I will say is if the defensive line takes over our offensive line, that's how you lose football games, right? Your offensive line just getting beaten by the opposing defensive line. And we've seen that happen to this Vikings team, right? We saw it happen against the Cowboys, and that's what really cost us this game. So, Kenny Clark's a great player. Rashawn Gary's a pretty good player. And they've got some talent there, so it's certainly possible that they could take over the game. I don't think that's what happens. I think this is another game where it's kind of a nail-biter down to the wire, and because the Vikings are 11-0 in those games this season, why not make it 12-0, right?
Ding, ding. You know what my response to all that is, Matt? As eloquent as it was, as detailed as it was, as smart as it was, my response is FTP, baby. FTP. We're gonna beat the Pack this week. Any straggling thoughts? Anything you wanted to add about the game?
I have a lot more faith in Greg Joseph kicking than I do Mason Crosby. I don't even understand how Mason Crosby's still an NFL kicker. Honestly, does he even attempt field goals over like 40 yards anymore, or do the Packers just go for it on fourth down?
He's the Packers mascot. Of course, they have a kicker for a mascot. Come on.
Yeah. No, it's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, that's good. We've gone 4 straight weeks now, I guess, by slandering our opponent, and it's really worked out for us the past 3 weeks. So let's see if we can keep it rolling. There haven't been any weird games where we almost lost or actually lost to the Lions or something like that. So nothing could go wrong.
FTP, baby. All right, Matt. You know what time it is, right?
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately.
Baby, you know what time it is. Time for 15 seconds of fantasy.
I'm really disappointed.
My favorite part of the show. We spend 15 seconds talking about our fantasy team, and that's all we're going to subject you to. So the clock starts now. Go, Matt.
So I beat Greg earlier this year and Nick earlier this year, and Greg just didn't come on the show until he finally beat me this time.
I got you back, pal. I'm in the championship game. Nick is out. I'm the only Kindred Skulls member representing, as it should be. All right. This has been really fun. Matt, where can folks find you on Twitter to follow all your amazing Vikings football content?
You can find me at Fries Football, and I kind of just tweeted out the entire Giants game yesterday, so go peruse tape from that if you want to.
Really want to, if you want to dig in and get all the deets, even more deets. You can also follow our other regular co-host Nick Olson at Nick Olson NFL. Spelled exactly how it sounds. You can find me. I'm no longer on Twitter, but you can find me on Instagram at You've Been Gregg. I've kind of migrated myself over there. You can find the show at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. We're also available. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube. All of our video content is up by searching for Kindred Skulls. Matt, it's been lovely rejoining you this week. Thank you for letting me step in, and I had fun, man.
Yeah, absolutely. We love having you on the show, Greg. It's always fun. And I think we'll end it with Skull Vikings.
Skull Vikings, baby. Beat the Pack. Skull, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind. And we'll score.